period since then, even though the county has gone for Republicans in the presidential races, up until about 10, 15 years ago, it was primarily a Democratic stronghold.
Yeah.
The legislative seats, the state Senate seats, the county commissioner seats, they were all run by the Democrats, and now it seems like if the Democrats can't buy a victory.
I mean, they keep, obviously, you can look at the courthouse and what happened last year, losing the Board of Commissioners seat for first time in 60 years.
60 years.
The sheriff's office obviously became Republican. The coroner's office became Republican. You have, one Democrat, it looks like now, in Rob Massey in the state delegation. It's just a sea change and a head scratcher that a lot of people could not have imagined. Like you said, 20, 30 years ago, if you would have told them in 2016 there'd be one Democrat, from the county and the state house, they would have laughed at you.
Yeah, and and let's not underplay the fact that the union strength in Beaver County was considerable 20, 30 years ago.
They were guaranteed Democratic votes. Any Democrat could have counted on that. And I think you can draw a straight line from the demise of organized labor and its political power to what's happening. Yeah,
there's no big surprise when you look at those numbers. And we now have 87% numbers in for Pennsylvania. Boy, this one's gone back and forth all night long, and it looks like it's still going to continue to go back and forth. Donald Trump showing a slight lead right now in Pennsylvania, 48.28% to Hillary Clinton's 48.16%. In the U.S. Senate race, this one is also incredibly close. Pat Toomey, 48.11%. Katie McGinty, 47.9%. We knew that one was going to be a close race from the get-go. In fact, everybody was saying that one was just simply too close to call, and that's the way it's shaping up right now.
Yep.
In some of the other races, we've got in the 10th legislative state house race, looks like Aaron Bernstein has pulled off the big upset against incumbent Jared Gibbons, who was seeking his 6th term. The statewide numbers now show Bernstein with almost 55% of the vote to Gibbons 45%. It's almost a 10 percentage point difference, which we thought that race would be a little closer.
Yeah, that's a surprise to a lot of people. That was seen as really a toss-up race by virtually everyone I talked to, and that would come down to 50.5, 49.5 kind of thing. Both of them worked hard. That's all I heard was that this was the hardest that Jared had ever worked. Aaron had worked hard in the primary and kept it going.
Yeah.
So maybe he just kept that momentum from the primary and just took it into the general and never really slacked off. Like I said, it attracted a lot of money from both parties, coming in with mailers and staff and assistants that can't be discounted. And I don't think you can ignore the fact of what happened in the last week with the Times pulling the endorsement for Jared Gibbons after he in the HDCC ran that ad referencing a story of ours that the editorial board felt was basically misleading. And I think that probably had what percentage that you can attribute it to, I don't know. But from talking with people, that definitely had an impact on the race.
Yeah, I know a lot of people talked about that, and I don't know how much, like you, I don't know how much it swayed it, but I think it did have an impact, especially towards the end of the race there.
Yeah, in a close race like that, something of that nature obviously can be a big factor. Not to discount, the work and everything that Aaron put into that. Yeah. Obviously, if this holds and he wins by 10 percentage points, it's I think indicative of a lot more than just, an endorsement being pulled. And I think a lot of it has to do with turnout. I'm sure that Trump would win heavily in that district, and that had a lot to do with it too.
Yeah, it was the right election cycle to get in as a challenger.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
Just run through a couple other numbers for you real quickly. In the 37th state Senate race, this is in western Allegheny County, incumbent Guy Reschenthaler, he's easily going to win re-election. It's kind of a quick re-election for him. He's only been in office 1 year. He won a special election last year, and he was up for election now to complete for a new term, a full term. He's up by almost more than 20 percentage points over his challenger, Ed Eichenlaub. And the 15th legislative race, I think we mentioned that once before. Jim Christiana is considerably ahead now. Looks like 63% to 36%. We knew Jim was in pretty good shape in that district, and that
Right.
those numbers reflect
no
that.
surprise, yeah.
Okay, we're going to go through some numbers right now, but first we're going to let JD get back to the newsroom. We should tell you that we're coming to you. We were planning to come to you live from the Times newsroom. We had a change of plans due to the fact that, like many of you probably in the Beaver County area, we were faced with a internet outage. AT&T is having some major issues throughout the region. If you want to see a newsroom go into a panic, shut down the internet. And we quickly pulled together some options, and we are coming to you live from, believe it or not, from the kitchen of one of our Times staff members. Mary Beth Eastman has graciously opened her home to us because she had internet access, so she was the winner. So we're coming to you live from her kitchen, and we're very happy that we could make this happen, because a couple of hours ago there was a lot of hand-wringing going on how we were going to pull this off. So we're going to let JD get back to the newsroom because he's got some stories to write. We're going to continue to watch the election results nationally, and as JD makes his way out, we're going to bring in another Times staffer, Tom Davidson, who's going to join us to talk a little bit about the couple of races that we were talking earlier in the state from our district that are really not up for grabs in a lot of ways, because the incumbents are really on a roll there. But before we do that, we're going to just look at some numbers coming in again from CNN. We've been watching their polling numbers throughout the night. As of well, it's at 11:20. They're still calling Florida, Michigan, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin as too close to call. And, excuse me, Hillary Clinton has a slight lead in the electoral vote, 197 to 187. We knew from the moment that the polls came out earlier this week that this was going to be a very, very close election. No surprise here that many of these states are just too close to call. It's going to come down to the final precincts in virtually all of them. And right now, they're showing in Florida that Trump has a slight lead there. Likewise in Arizona, although that's not a big surprise. Florida, once again, as Representative Rob Matzey pointed out before, Florida could be a key once again to what happens in the presidential election. But we're gonna move off that for the moment, and we're going to talk about a couple of statewide races. Joining me now is Times reporter Tom Davidson, and Tom has been following for us this evening two races where we have a couple of incumbents who really don't have a lot to worry about at the moment, you would think, Tom, right?
Yeah.
Let's start with the 15th legislative district. We're only looking at Beaver County numbers now, and I don't know if you had any from Washington County, but Jim Christiana had a pretty significant lead in Beaver County.
Yeah, and he does throughout the district as well. From the latest numbers that I've seen from the Department of the State, Jim is up 63%, 36.9% for Mike Rossi.
And that number is pretty consistent with what we're seeing in Beaver County as well. A little mic issue there. In Beaver County, we have Jim Christiana with a 19 percentage point lead, and throughout the district, pretty similar numbers showing, right, Tom?
Yeah, no surprises there. And I've actually just finished speaking with both candidates, and you were speaking about the AT&T power or wireless outage. That's also impacted. Mike Rossi conceded the race, but he had no way of getting in touch with Jim to concede. And I actually talked with Jim on his landline, and I talked with Mike by calling Vesuvio's, where he was waiting out the election results.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this has just been a crazy day in terms of us trying to get numbers and figure out a game plan without having internet access in the building. So we've been working different scenarios throughout the evening, using people using cell phones as hotspots and just trying to make this all work. So it's good to know that we weren't the only ones that were impacted by that. I want to take one moment here, Tom, and look at the latest statewide numbers. We have at 87.82% of the vote in now, and it looks as though Donald Trump has 48.34% to Hillary Clinton's 48.11. Again, less than, 2/10 of a percentage lead.
Wow.
And it looks as if we have had a shift in the U.S. Senate race. It now looks like Katie McGinty has the slight lead, 48.15 over Pat Toomey, 47.85. So just a couple of updated numbers we wanted to show you. And the 15th legislative that we were just talking about, Jim Christiana, 63% to 36% for Mike Rossi. So you're looking at 27 percentage points. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
And looks like we've got an updated number coming in here now in the Senate race. We've got, with those numbers that we gave you a moment ago, look like they were flipped. So we have Pat Toomey actually in front of Katie McGinty, and the numbers look like 48.15 for Toomey, 47.86 for McGinty. So that's going to be a close race. Still, 13% of the vote in Pennsylvania not counted. So the presidential outcome and the state Senate, or the U.S. Senate outcome in Pennsylvania still very much in doubt at this time.
Yeah, if we only knew where those districts were that are uncounted.
That would tell us a lot. I'm sure somebody's watching that closely, but we can't see that at the moment. We're just following these statewide numbers. Tom, let's move on to one other uncontested race that you've been following. This is in the 37th state Senate race, and this is in western Allegheny County. Guy Reschenthaler is the incumbent, and he's being challenged by Ed Eichenlaub. And really, this race was not close at all either.
Yeah. Again, that was according to the Department of State numbers from moments ago. Guy Reschenthaler was up he had 60% of the vote to Eichenlaub's 39.2%. So that really wasn't even close. And from talking with Reschenthaler, he was thankful to the voters for getting a chance at a full term.
Yeah, he'd only served 1 year. He had replaced Matt Smith, who had resigned his post to take over in Pittsburgh. I think as the president of the Chamber of Commerce in Pittsburgh, if I recall correctly. Yeah. And Reschenthaler won that special election. So a year later, he's back on the campaign trail, and he has a pretty handy win here, pretty easily, rather, 20 percentage points over Ed Eichenlaub. And this was another case where you have a candidate in Ed Eichenlaub who went into the race with very little money and very little organization, just kind of hoping that he might
Yeah.
flag down some support.
Yeah, he basically threw his hat into the ring to have some opposition, so that Reschenthaler wasn't unopposed, and that was really his campaign shtick. Now, he didn't return a call seeking comment yet, but from talking with Reschenthaler, though, he was amazed by the amount of energy out at the polls today. He had said that was something that, on both sides, that the amount of energy out there for all of the candidates was something that was that was evident to him, and he was just hoping that that enthusiasm kind of continues.
Yeah, I think that's echoed throughout what we're seeing nationally, that the races in so many states are so very close that people went to the polls and decided they were going to try to make a difference.
Yeah, very much so, and it was something that we're a divided nation.
Yeah.
And it's showing tonight.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and one thing that we had talked about earlier, and we had talked about this in the newsroom as well, the concept of, or the claim coming from Donald Trump and from many of his supporters of a rigged election is plays into the whole divisiveness of this campaign. It's not something that you would typically hear from a presidential candidate saying that, hey, the election's rigged if I don't win.
Yeah, it's really surprising, and it is, as we've stated editorially, it's an insult to the election workers who really do a thankless job, and they get very little compensation for it. In most cases, they're retirees. They're people who are civic minded, and they're doing the best that they can do, and they're devoting 2 days a year to ensuring that the election runs smoothly. And they're very in Beaver County and in the other counties that I've lived, they take their job very seriously.
Yeah, it says something about the value of our election system, in that we turn the oversight of the election over to people in the community. We don't turn it over to the military or to security forces. We turn it over to regular citizens and say, you watch the polls.
Yeah, these are people who step up, and there's also, there are the poll watchers out there, and there are the people that are campaigning. It's just any improprieties with the election is just would require such a conspiracy.
Yeah.
That it's not even worth considering, and also you just think about the work that these people do put in.
Yeah, and we had written about this editorially as well, because when you break it down, if you were going to try to rig an election, you would have to have a conspiracy of preposterous nature, because you would need to start with the poll workers, and then get the county elections people involved, and then get the Pennsylvania Department of State involved, and it's a layer after layer after layer that you have to go through to make that work, and it's just absurd to think that you could pull that off.
It definitely is, and just even in Beaver County, they took extra precautions this year. I know from speaking with our elections director Doreen Miandidi, they were using new flash drives for every upload that they did to ensure that everything was sealed. And those flash drives were stored in an area that was monitored by camera. The election machines are monitored by, and they upgraded the cameras this year so that she could actually watch from her desk the machines as they were stored, and she's monitoring everything from all levels of the vote.
Yeah, and the fact is that the counties really run the elections and then pass the results on to the state. So it's really a local operation, and those people really do a thankless job, and we owe them some gratitude for all the work that they do. Let's talk now a little bit about the statewide numbers. as we're looking right now, it's still on the electoral vote, by the way. CNN is still reporting that Hillary Clinton is at 197 and Donald Trump is at 187. They're showing Pennsylvania right now as being too close to call, and it looks like it looks like we're inching along right now. We're at 88% of the statewide numbers in. If I'm reading this correctly, Clinton is ahead, 48.44. Okay, wait a minute. Stacey Fedoroff is going to update these numbers for us right now. Looks like she has them slightly backwards, but we're getting them. But it looks like Donald Trump has the slight lead with 88% of the vote in, 48.44 to 48.01. On the Senate race, Pat Toomey still has a slight lead over Kate McGinty, 48.14 to 47.86. And in the 12th congressional race, we've noted this before, this has been an easy win for Keith Rothfuss. He's up 62% to Aaron McClellan's 38%. So that's the statewide numbers at the moment. Again, the electoral map is still very much in flux here. The lead for Hillary Clinton is 10 electoral votes at the moment, but this election is really going to come down to key states: Pennsylvania, Michigan. It looks like out west here, it looks like California is definitely going to go in the Clinton column, as will Oregon and Washington. But it's going to be a long night before we know who's the winner here, Tom. Right?
It's definitely too close to call at this point, and that's it. It should be no real surprise, given the divisiveness that's taken place over these last 2 years.
Yeah.
Really.
Okay, well, thank you, Tom. Thanks for stopping in. I know you've got to get back to the newsroom as well. Again, we are coming to you live from the kitchen of one of our Time staff members, Mary Beth Eastman. We are the victims of the internet outage that is affecting very many customers throughout the area this evening. You probably couldn't find a worse day to have the internet issues come up that we've had to experience today. So we moved locations. We were going to be coming to you live from our newsroom at the Beaver County Times. We had to make some adjustments on the fly. We're doing the best we can here, and I think we've got things pretty well under control for having to make some adjustments at the last minute. We're going to bring in now our Times Assistant Managing Editor, Kristen Dorschner, who reminded me earlier today that this is way past her bedtime because she's got 2 little ones at home. But we've got some things to talk about that we wanted to make sure that we got into the discussion here before we wrapped up for the evening. And Kristen, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
I know that things are a little crazy tonight, and are we okay back at the newsroom?
We're okay. We are doing remarkably well. Our IT guy came through and let us know that the power outage is apparently the result of an accident somewhere in Pennsylvania that severed a line. So the good news is they've identified the problem. The bad news, it could be 6 o'clock tomorrow night before we have internet again. So.
Well, if you, as I said before, if you want to see a panic, go into a newsroom and pull the plug on the internet. And that's pretty much what happened tonight. And we've made it through, so we're doing the best we can.
We're managing fairly well under the circumstances.
Kristen, one thing I wanted to talk to you about, and Tom Davidson and I touched a little bit about this, the divisiveness of the campaigns this year has really brought out a lot of ugliness throughout, and people were really concerned, I think rightfully so, that there could be incidents at the polling places today. did we have any reports of any problems at any of the precincts in Beaver County?
Not at all. As far as we had reporters out at various polling sites throughout the county, and we were checking in with the Elections Bureau, and things went very smoothly. There were very few issues reported, and there were no reports of any problems amongst the people there. So things actually went really well today.
Okay, well, good to know. And we were talking a little while ago about the possibility of rigging an election. We kind of debunked that theory. I don't know if anybody else was talking about that. Have you heard people on either side of it talking about that?
I've heard a lot of concern from people about the possibility of having a rigged election. Even some people I know have said, well, you never know what happens after you cast that vote. It could be tampered with. So I think there's a lot of skepticism about the process, particularly with the concerns about hackers and whatnot. And I don't think that people really understand the process that happens from the time that you go in and cast your vote to the time that it gets to where it needs to be. But you have a really great grasp of that, because I think you gave a lot of people in the newsroom a good lesson on that. So.
Yeah, this is one of those things that when you go into the polling places in Beaver County and throughout most of Pennsylvania, although there's still some that use paper ballots, believe it or not, but most of the electronic places, you'll see, you'll go into the voting booth, and they'll bring that block. It almost looks like kind of looks like a tape measure.
It reminds me of an old Nintendo cartridge,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. They come over and they insert that into the machine to allow you to vote. And at the end of the night, the vote that those blocks, and Doreen Manditti, the Beaver County Elections Bureau, had a name for it, and I forget what she called it now, a peg or a pep or something. Anyway, that block, they tabulate all of the votes from that particular precinct. Now, they're required then to make a printout of the results from that precinct, and they post it on the door of the precinct. So if anybody wanted to go right now to a particular precinct, there should be the vote total listed there once they tabulate those. They then take that electronic cartridge, as it is, to the courthouse, where it's turned over to the Elections Bureau, and then it's tabulated with the county results. And then the county, in turn, passes on their results to the Pennsylvania Department of State, which tabulates them further. And all of these are audited when they do the official results, which takes place usually within a week or two after the election. So the idea that you could possibly rig an election is difficult to pull off in the best of conditions.
It sounds like you would really have to have a conspiracy of sorts that would start with the poll worker, who chances are around here, your poll worker. Most of us vote in smaller neighborhoods, so you would almost have to have it right from the poll workers, from the people who are your neighbors, clear on through up to the state level. So that's there's a lot of measures in place.
And the one thing that I think it's really important for people to understand is when you vote and those votes are tabulated, the machinery and the mechanism used is not through an internet network. There's no internet connection to this. So the idea that a hacker could somehow hack into the system and adjust votes one way or the other is simply not possible, because there's no outside access to it. They are self-contained units in each county.
Well, and I think we've all become so dependent on the internet, we just assume anything computerized goes through the internet.
Yeah, it must have an internet connection.
Yeah.
So anyway, I hope people have gotten past that. I suspect that because how close this election is, that there will be people who will not give up that chant. It's going to be one of those election results. We're just looking now at CNN, and it's still too close to call in many states. It could be well into the wee hours of the morning before we actually have any kind of idea of where we stand on this.
I had actually just checked the Pennsylvania State Department's website just before I headed over here, and there were about 1,000 votes difference between Clinton and Trump, so it was incredibly close. It's
going to be very, very close in Pennsylvania. Yeah. One other thing that I wanted to talk about, and CNN is just now declaring that the state of Washington has gone for Hillary Clinton. There's Not a big surprise in that one. The vote for the constitutional amendment.
Yes.
Here we have, and as I'm saying this, I'm looking over at Stacy Federoff, who's been monitoring the Department of State site for us, see if she can get us any numbers on that constitutional amendment vote. In Beaver County, well, first of all, let's talk about it.
Sure.
The wording on the proposal, which is fairly absurd, was, would you support a constitutional amendment that would require judges to retire at the age of 75? Now, that's not the exact wording, that's pretty close.
Very similar. Incredibly vague wording.
Yes.
And for someone who's not familiar with the court system or the process, it really doesn't tell them anything about what they're voting on. They don't know if you're not familiar with the court system.
No, you could read that to say that judges, they must be at 80 years now, so they're reducing it to 75.
Or no age, really, when it comes right down to it.
And what they're not telling you is that judges right now are required, this is for Supreme Court justices, county judges, state judges, district justices, would require them, or they are required now to retire at age 70.
Correct.
This vote would raise it to 75. And it looks like statewide right now, again, this was with 88% of the precincts in, that is showing at 50.58% yes, which would raise it to 75, and 49.42 for no, which would keep it at 70. Very confusing. I think it was very unfair to the voters to put it out this way. And in Beaver County, the vote was really not that close. The no votes were 52%, and the yes votes were 47%.
Yeah.
And we've all dealt with judges at one point. You covered the courts enough to know that there are. I'm sure there are judges that are very capable at age 75, and there are probably some that aren't.
And we see that the senior judges are the ones who you tend to see on the bench beyond 70. Once judges retire, they can act as a senior judge for a certain number of years. And I've certainly seen senior judges who are still incredibly capable, competent, and I've seen some senior judges who I've thought perhaps should have retired by now. And you kind of wonder, what are they doing up there? So, I think that, they still have the option to work as senior judges on a limited basis beyond 70.
But the interesting thing about this is that even the legal system is pretty divided on this. For instance, we had our district attorney, David Lozier, who prior to being elected district attorney, spent his career in the civil division.
Correct.
And he was very, very adamant that he thought this should not be accepted, and he point blank said that he's had to practice in front of judges that were falling asleep or had no idea what was going on, or had to be told later how to rule, and it was to him it was an embarrassment to the system and unfair to people.
Yeah, and he's clearly witnessed some pretty egregious situations. So he definitely had very strong feelings on it. There were some other groups that were a little less harsh perhaps about the situation. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely a divided issue amongst attorneys and other judges and people who work in the system and see this all the time. And I'm not sure if that very close margin we're seeing on the ballot is because people, are also just divided on it, or if they just don't understand, and so we just saw a completely random yes or no, and the chips just happened to fall nearly 50-50 on this one.
Yeah, as I said, I thought that it was very unfair to the voters to position or to place the question on there. And what's interesting is the original question that went through a court battle.
Yes, I was just going to say, this is the second time voters have had a question about this issue, just worded differently.
They had a ballot issue in the spring. It was worded differently, but through court challenges, it was ruled that those votes would not be counted.
Correct. So we've all actually voted on this before already.
Yeah. So we're still waiting to see how that all pans out, and it could be quite a while before Pennsylvania's we get to 100% figure in Pennsylvania. One other thing that Kristen and I were going to touch on: voter turnout in Beaver County. Big turnouts in presidential elections is nothing new. It looks like, and the number on here is a little misleading because you have to factor in some other things. Absentee ballots and the like aren't included in this. But it's showing almost 71% right now.
Yeah, which actually falls pretty much in line with past elections.
Presidential
elections, yes, thank you for that clarification. Presidential elections. Beaver County, going back several presidential elections now, has hovered right around that 70 to 71% voter turnout. Though I have to say, I was a little surprised. I thought it might be a bit higher this time. As we talked about earlier in the week, I know people, adults, who registered for the first time ever in this election who have never voted. And even just anecdotally today, hearing from people at the polls, it seemed like, people said, my father-in-law said, I had to wait in line.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law actually they have a polling place at her church, so she has to open up for the poll workers in the morning. And she said, I went upstairs to work and I told them, I'm coming down at 7. I'm going to be the first voter. She said at 10 to 7, I looked out the window and there was a line out the door. So, I thought we might inch a little higher just based on some of that anecdotal.
Yeah, and the long lines would indicate that, or would lead you to believe that there was a higher turnout. But 71% that when adjusted might be closer, 73 or 74. I'm not sure. That's still a pretty good turnout. If we could get to 80 or 90%, that would be remarkable. But I think that's pretty consistent of what we've seen in presidential elections. We're looking right now at CNN projection. They're showing that Donald Trump has 232 electoral votes, and they just moved off that. There's 209 for Hillary Clinton. So we're inching up towards almost midnight, and still too close to call, and it could be early in the morning before we know where we're at here. Again, Trump at 232, Clinton at 209. Very, very close race still in Pennsylvania. We're looking right now at Pennsylvania numbers with 90% of the vote in. Trump at 48.32 and Clinton at 48.13. So again, just very, very, very close. Now we're showing in the U.S. Senate race, Toomey is ahead 48.13 to McGinty 47.84. Again, a very, very close race. Not much room there for. Certainly can't call that one. Not much room between the two candidates. On the referendum vote that we were just talking about, that still seems to be holding right around 50 to 49. So that's going to go for quite a while yet. And the other races that we've been watching all through the night, they're pretty much locked down now. We know that in the 10th state house race, Aaron Bernstein has defeated incumbent Jared Gibbons rather easily, 56% to 43%. In the 15th state house race, incumbent Jim Christiana has defeated challenger Mike Rossi 63% to 36%. In the 37th state Senate race, incumbent Guy Reschenthaler has defeated challenger Ed Eichenlaub 60% to 40%. And in the 12th congressional, fairly easy win for U.S. Representative Keith Rothfuss from Sewickley. He defeats Democrat Aaron McClellan 61.87% to 38.13%. So outside of the races for the president and U.S. Senate, it's pretty clear where Pennsylvania is going right now in some of the other races. I think we are going to look at some other national numbers now and review some other numbers. But Kristen, I'm going to let you get back to the newsroom.
Great.
I'll be over shortly to watch this through to the bloody end, as we say.
We'll be there.
Okay. Thank you for stopping
Thank
by.
you.
And we're looking back again now at what the national races are looking, the national race for president from CNN right now. Again, Michigan, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, still too close to call. And those states are going to play key roles in who becomes our next president. Right now, Donald Trump has a lead in the electoral vote, 232 to 209. But those states that are too close to call, especially Pennsylvania, Michigan, New Hampshire, those are keys to victory for either candidate. And we'll be watching that through the evening to see what's happening. In Wisconsin, it looks as though Trump has a rather sizable lead, but there are still many precincts out. In Michigan, it's very close. Again, Trump with about a percentage point lead there. And in Pennsylvania, CNN is now showing in Pennsylvania that Clinton has a slight lead, although I'm not sure those numbers are the same ones that we're looking at from the Pennsylvania Department of State. Just to recap for you, in Beaver County, for instance, Hillary Clinton needed to do much better than she did. Donald Trump, we figured would win in Beaver County. It's been a kind of a pattern over the last several presidential campaigns, but we're surprised by that total. Donald Trump beating Hillary Clinton by 16,000 votes in Beaver County. It's 57% to 37%. Just a big margin that we did not see coming. In the race for the presidency in Pennsylvania now, we are at 92.38%, and Trump has a slight lead still, 48.43 to Hillary Clinton's 48.01. In the U.S. Senate race, Pat Toomey continues to hold a very slight lead over Kate McGinty, 48.13 to 47.84. Those are the two races that we're still following here in the state, and we're going to continue to look at those. But at the moment, we're going to take a break here as we head into the final minutes of our coverage tonight to answer some questions that we received from people on Twitter. And we're going to ask Stacy Fedoroff, who's been working hard behind the scenes with our director, producer, executive producer, Marina Weiss, who has been working hard to make this all happen tonight. We are going to take a few Twitter questions and see if we can answer some of those for you. Stacy, hi, Stacy. Thanks for all your work back there tonight, by the way. I know this has been a challenge for all of us. Which question do you want to start with? Maybe we can take a look at something here that we want to address.
Well, I did have one good question. Since so many states made early voting available and many voters seem to take advantage of it in other states, do you think Pennsylvania should consider allowing early voting?
That's a good question. We had Representative Rob Matzey on here, and Rob follows the political scene as well as anyone. He thought strongly that Pennsylvania needed to do early voting, or at least, as he said, loosen some of the rules on the absentee ballot voting. I don't see a problem with early voting. I think it's been very effective in other states. It could cut down on what we saw in Pennsylvania today in several polls where there were long lines. Rob mentioned that there was a poll out in Murraysville where people didn't get to vote until almost 9:30. When a poll was supposed to close at 8 o'clock. And I think the rule in Pennsylvania is that if you're in line when the poll is supposed to close, they have to allow you to vote. Mm-hmm. So however long that takes, that's the way it goes. So I think Pennsylvania will come around to this. We kind of abhor change in Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania in particular.
I was going to mention that.
Yeah, we're kind of change resistant, but it seems to be an effective way to allow people to vote, and avoid those long lines at polls. Now, some people say that if you're going to allow early voting, what happens when there's changes at the last minute? And we saw that in the last week or so with the FBI message about the emails, which turned out to be nothing, and according to the FBI again. So things like that do factor into it, but I think it's an effective way. A lot of states mail out the ballot and you mail it back. So.
I had another question. Journalists have been harshly criticized this election cycle. Do you see the fallout changing the way elections are reported in the future, or affecting journalists' access to candidates? This would be one we're uniquely qualified to answer as journalists.
I think there's a couple of things to consider here. Who are you referring to as journalists and who aren't journalists is probably a good starting point. A lot of people have a lot of criticism for what they call the mainstream media. I don't consider you and I mainstream media. I think we know our area, we know the people in our area. I think that journalists have an important responsibility in the election cycle. They get criticized sometimes for asking the questions that need to be asked. And they dig into things that people sometimes don't want to talk about. I think where we kind of, and I think this is a criticism that will go mainly to the presidential race. I think we, in this election cycle, became distracted by the non-issues or the lesser issues rather than the real issues that matter. And I think there will be a little soul searching done among journalists. Did we handle that correctly? Should we have pressed more on policy issues instead of dealing with the sound bites? So we'll see.
I know we also had a question come from one of our reporters, our colleagues. A few questions. One of them was, both candidates came to Western PA several times. What does that say about this area, and how may that have influenced voters?
Well, Western Pennsylvania is a very unique place because Democrats may hold a voter registration edge in many counties in Western Pennsylvania, but Democrats in Western Pennsylvania don't vote like typical Democrats in other parts. I think J.D. Prose, when he was mentioning before, said that a Western Pennsylvania Democrat is a Philadelphia Republican, and that's probably not too far removed from the truth. It's a very conservative group. They may be registered as Democrats, but they don't anymore. They don't tend to vote strictly on party lines. I think that they vote more on issues, and they tend to be very conservative on a lot of issues, very pro-life, very pro-Second Amendment, very much fiscally conservative. So that's not your typical. It's not your typical Democrat in many ways, and
Right.
That's what it is in Western Pennsylvania. So I think both candidates saw it as an important area. Trump saw it as a area where he could, if you just looked at the past several election cycles, presidential election cycles, it was clear that this was ripe for the taking again, and he did. And Clinton noted that it was an important part. Marina is pointing out a couple of things for me right now. Good. 92.5% of the vote in Pennsylvania. Still incredibly close here in the presidential race. Donald Trump 48.5%, Hillary Clinton 47.93%. And in the Senate race, Pat Toomey still ahead, 48.4 to 47.61. So those are the updates on the national races. And still, most of the networks are still not calling this the Michigan, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, those are the big four in play right now. And they're saying that those are just too close to call. When the difference in a couple of these places is less than 30,000 votes, over 3 or 4 million cast. So in Pennsylvania, they are showing slightly different numbers than what we just saw. They're showing Clinton with just a very slight lead, 48.3 to 48.2. And in New Hampshire, Trump with a very slight lead, 47.9 to 47. So all of these are these are going to determine who is our next president,
Right.
and Pennsylvania is going to play a very important role in this one.
Right. Well, thanks, Tom, for answering some of our outlined questions from the newsroom and from others. I
Okay.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Stacey. I think we are ready to wrap up for the evening. If I'm looking at Marina. She's saying yes. We're going to go one more time through some of the election numbers locally, just so we can hit those once more before we depart for the evening. In Beaver County, this is with 100%, all 129 precincts in now. Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump easily beating Hillary Clinton in Beaver County, 57% to 37%. That was with 46,000 votes to 30,000 votes. In the race for the U.S. Senate, Pat Toomey easily outdistanced Democrat Katie McGinty in Beaver County, 42,000 to 32,000, which was about a 13 percentage point difference. A couple of the races also that we were following in the 12th Congressional District, Keith Rothfuss in Beaver County with about a 20 percentage point difference over Aaron McClellan, 46,000 votes to 31,000. And in the 10th Legislative District, that's 10th State House, Jared Gibbons was defeated by political newcomer Republican Aaron Bernstein. The vote total in Beaver County was 59-12 to 49-02, which was about a 9 percentage point difference. That margin was even wider, so it turned out to be about 10 percentage points district-wide. And over in the 15th State House race, Jim Christiana in Beaver County easily outdistanced Democrat Mike Rossi, 10,941 to 7,381, a difference of about 19 percentage points. We should also note that there were several people running for re-election who were unopposed in the races this year. That included Representative Jim Marshall from the 14th District, so he wins re-election. Representative Rob Matsey in the 16th District, he wins re-election. And State Senator Elder Vogel Jr. in the 47th State Senate race, he is re-elected as well. And lastly, the vote in Beaver County on the proposed constitutional amendment, which would raise the retirement age for justices, judges, district magistrates from 70 years to 75 years. That was defeated in Beaver County, but it looks like it has a slight advantage statewide at this point. The vote in Beaver County was 37,822 no and 34,492 yes, about a 5 percentage point difference, 52% to 47%. Now on the statewide numbers, the yes vote seems to be holding right around 50%, 50.79, and the no vote 49.21. So it looks like that retirement age may hold up. If we're looking at the percentage of precincts reporting in right now in Pennsylvania, it's still right around 93%. The the Trump lead is at 48.57% to Clinton's 47.92. And in the U.S. Senate race, Pat Toomey at 48.45 and Katie McGinty at 47.58. So that's where we are right now in the race for the presidency and the U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania. Still too close to call. Still several precincts that have not been counted. If you're watching the election results nationwide, as many of us are, the map right now shows Donald Trump with 232 electoral votes and Hillary Clinton with 209. Pennsylvania, they're saying, is still too close to call, and the margin there, they're showing that Donald Trump is up by about 7,000 votes in Pennsylvania statewide. So this is still developing, still going to go on for a while yet. The presidential race is going to be a while before we know the winner, and we're seeing some updated numbers here. Donald Trump at 48.65 in Pennsylvania, Hillary Clinton at 47.85, and in the U.S. Senate race, Pat Toomey at 48.45 and Kate McGinty at 47.88. So that's going to wrap it up for us for our election 2016 coverage right now. Thank you for joining us here at timesonline.com. For all the people who have worked hard to make this happen tonight, thank you very much. To Stacy Fedorov for helping us behind the scenes and monitoring the results throughout the evening and following Twitter questions. Marina Weiss, who has been diligently working behind the scenes, trying to make this all happen, producing. We have been moved from the Beaver County Times newsroom out to the kitchen of one of our staff members, Mary Beth Eastman, here in Beaver, because internet issues forced us to find a place where we could find a usable Wi-Fi signal. So that's where we are, and that's how things went this evening, and we're glad we could make it all happen. So thank you again. One more time, we have one more time. The race in Pennsylvania is still too close to call for president and for U.S. Senate, and we are going to follow that through the evening, and you can find the results throughout the day tomorrow at timesonline.com. For everybody at the Beaver County Times and for timesonline.com, I'm Tom Bickert. Thank you so much for joining us, and good evening.